Jacksonville. The child was born and couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history of this land of flowers.
The week that was on the 5th of January 2019 from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Old Boston Red here from the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. We go merrily along. We'll hear from Uncle Carl. Uncle Carl Rope had some predictions, how Uncle Carl came out with his predictions. The Trump shutdown continues on. There's no end in sight for it. We'll make some commentary about it and the latest human suffering at its very worst, no doubt about that. But firstly, we'll go to Uncle Carl and his predictions. He's writing as normally he does in the Wall Street Journal, where you'd expect Uncle Carl to be writing. My predictions are 2 for 3, thanks to Oscar. I guess he's in the Oscar business too. Oh, well. I made 29 predictions last January, and since accountability matters, I'm not sure about that. Doesn't matter at the White House, doesn't matter in the body politic. How did I do at the year's end? I got 19.5 right and 9.5 wrong. In some instances, widely so. Anyway, beginning with the correct prediction, you always start with your best shot. The GOP modestly expanded its Senate ranks, picking up 2 seats, and dropped below 30 governorships. Their tally falling to 27 Republicans, and also shed several hundred state legislative seats, 258 to be precise. Well, that put a dent in the infamous Koch brothers model. The Koch brothers, of course, formerly Wichita, Kansas, now of Palm Springs, California, and Palm Beach, Florida. Special Counsel Mueller wasn't fired. He and the U.S. Attorney, 7th District of New York, indicted 30 more individuals, and the Mueller probe appears to be winding down. Maybe, maybe not. China grew more aggressive. Its military officials are suggesting sinking U.S. carriers to discourage interference in the Pacific. Vladimir Putin keeps causing problems, including the predictive major incident in Ukraine, which the U.S. is not even in their interest or their sphere, period. Researchers on smartphones and social media suggest teenagers who are online are more depressed, and heavily users are twice as likely to display attention deficit or hyperactivity symptoms. Key White House aides and 6 cabinet members departed. Nikki Haley's star keeps rising. I'm not sure about where it's rising to. In a surprise, to me anyway, I got more Oscar picks right than wrong. Gary Oldman won Best Actor and deserved it. And The Shapes of Water, Best Picture, undeserved. My sole sports prediction, Alabama as a national champion, was correct. Well, a blind man could have got that one right. No offense to the sighted. Anyway, I got 3 forecasts half right and half wrong, as I predicted Congress would fail to pass the $1 trillion infrastructure program, but it didn't prove anything smaller. Either entitlement reform sputtered out, but lawmakers have failed to pass moderate, what he called moderate welfare reform. Well, no doubt the Trump administration is taking care of that with the most draconian measures they can find. There's been no war with North Korea. Pangnam has nuclear weapons. Experts doubt it has its missiles could reliably reach U.S. cities. My wrong prediction started with a dodgy Republican did not keep the House with 220 seats. North Carolina on field amidst voter fraud allegations. They'll be lucky to get 200. U.S. growth did not exceed 3%. Is likely to be 2.9%. Nor did Trump trade a dreamer fix for more border security spending. The Senate Intelligence Committee did not release its final report. There's no legislative mandating a tough response to electoral meddling by foreign powers. The Islamic State did not increase large-scale terrorist attacks. Trump approval rating didn't decline, but slightly improved, rising from 40% the 1st of January, that was 2018, to about 42.7 at the end of January of 2018. It's unclear if Jared Kushner is in a worse legal shape. Sam Rockwell, not Christopher Plummer, won the Best Supporting Actor. I'm not sure why he flipped to that. And with last year out of the way, here's my fearless predictions for 2019. Mueller knows something big that we don't, but he'll tell us. We'll find that Trump knew about the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russian officials, but on the other hand, the investigation won't find evidence that Trump's campaign conspired with the Russian Federation. Although it will find family businesses kept the door open to Moscow hotel deal for too long. Trump will have legal exposure on some hush money payments to Karen McDougal, because Michael Cohen had tapped a corporation for the dough with Trump's knowledge. The House will impeach the president, but the Senate won't convict him. I'm doubtful at this time that the House will actually impeach DJ Trump. It would not be a prudent move at this time in history. Now, that doesn't mean that months later perhaps they would, but at this time, no. Trump is being Trump. Let him be Trump, and there's no reason to tie up the House with an impeachment matter, because that could play more into the hands of reactionary forces, and at the same time, it could be not a very good situation. By spring, fusions will emerge amongst congressional Democrats on health care. They proposed a Green New Deal. Congress will end 2019 less popular than it began, and Speaker Pelosi's, favorable rating will be almost 20% lower than Trump's. There will be at least 20 Democratic presidential candidates. Joe Biden won't be one of them. That's kind of interesting. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders will lead the pack, along with Robert Francis O'Rourke, otherwise known as Beto O'Rourke, as the party's shiny new toy. China will pledge to purchase more from America and cut tariffs on U.S. goods, but will continue to facilitate intellectual property theft. V.I. Putin will escalate tension in the Ukraine and strike somewhere else. 2 Iranian surrogates will increase attack on the northern borders of the Zionist state. It'll be interesting to see if Joe Biden is not in the race. That just means that he's out of the race, but you would still, according to Uncle Carl, have Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders leading the pack. And, of course, where will Beto O'Rourke be? Well, the situation is, I guess this is time we can talk a little bit about Iowa. Bernie has been in Iowa. He has campaigned there. They are familiar with Bernie in Iowa. That's the reason the corporate media, led by the New York Times and CNN, has attacked Bernie with this phony sexual abuse scheme. Not that the testimonies are not credible. What has happened, they blew it out of proportion. And Bernie's people, with their statement, muffed it. This statement was, in effect, they were apologizing to anyone who was offended. Well, the problem is people are always offended when they are harassed. Period. It would be sexually or whatever the situation was. These characters went too far. And as far as inviting them back, or even the option of inviting them back, that's just not on the table. They shouldn't be invited to any campaign. They should be done, taken out, and politically tarred and feathered. I didn't mean actually, just politically. In other words, vanished into the woods. Now, back to Iowa. Elizabeth Warren was in Iowa. Very smart move for her, because the knock on her is she was not personable enough. Well, Elizabeth Warren comes from the plain state of Oklahoma, very red state. It's 2 states down from Iowa, very close there. A lot of small towns. She no doubt knows small towns, has relatives in small towns, etc. And although she had been a Harvard professor, she could communicate with the so-called tourists and the working class, because she comes from the working class. So that takes care of 2. The other candidate is Amy Klobuchar. She's right next door, running a very similar campaign. She's going to have to get there. There's no doubt about that. And soon, because she's not as well known as Bernie Sanders there. And the new person, Beto O'Rourke. Well, Beto O'Rourke is hand-tailored for Iowa. He works the small towns very, very effectively. He can talk to farmers. He can talk to urban people, what few they have in Iowa. And he, like Bernie Sanders, is very good at connecting with, quote-unquote, the working class, which is most of Iowa, if you include the farmers and what have you, in that particular class scenario. As far as Joe Biden is concerned, that'll be interesting to see if Joe Biden doesn't run. Joe Biden has nothing to lose by running. In fact, the money would be with Joe Biden's extensive knowledge of the Democratic Party, and he would run a similar campaign as Hillary Monster Clinton, in that he would be a known quality to what few Democratic officials that are in, say, a state like Iowa. He would know many of those people. I would say the only reason that Joe Lunchbox Biden would not run is that he just didn't want to put the energy out. But at this point in time, he's basically that he is running. Now, some of the other people out there, Gillibrand of New York, she's calling around corporate donors to try to get some money to run with. because she is not known in Iowa. She is not known in New Hampshire. Of course, she is from upstate New York, and she put on a very good performance when we saw her at the National Action Center. So thus she can do that. She has a pretty good voting record as far as being somewhat progressive. But Elizabeth Warren, back to her, she can run on what she's actually done. She is single-handedly responsible for putting in the Consumer Protection Agency. And one of the things that happened, the gift, they're talking about gifts from DJ Trump, or gifts to DJ Trump. The current Trump shutdown has brought the economy front and center. Disregard the 300,000 jobs created. That is a temporary situation, a fluke. Look at a Q1 of this year, 2019, see where the jobs situation is. And as the jobs, the number of jobs produced, the indicators start to decline, there's a lot of juggling of the of the act of the what do you juggle with? Anyway, the juggling, as they say, of the discs, I guess we'll call them now. And what we mean by that is when you look at the markets and the market indicators, people are buying, selling. That's always going on. In commodities, they have been artificially high. Particularly petroleum, oil, but the demand is down. China's demand is down, but the global economy itself is down. Not only China, the emerging markets, the UK because of Brexit, they're down. France didn't do anything there. Italy is not rising as it once did. We'll be on Numbers Man, they call it the Numbers Man show. Anyway, that's our macroeconomics program. We'll be talking about all of this and the latest from Chairman Powell. He addressed I believe it was the American Economics Association. Basically he said if Trump removes him, he will not, tries to remove him, he will not resign. So we see more of that sort of thing coming up here. The other big item of the week, of course, let's see, we'll just play that little thing from our representative from the city of Detroit. She has the seat that at one time was held by John Conyers. And when you have that particular seat, obviously you need to take care of it properly. So let me just go to that little clip here. And it's only about 3 minutes long, so we'll get Rashida, and here we go. This is Media Matters, incidentally.
As a Palestinian, I expect Rashida Tlaib to be able to represent the Palestinian people, not only in the US, but in the whole world, because now she has a political platform to speak up for the Palestinians, especially now when the US government is taking steps to support the Israeli occupation and settlements.
Most of the time by the Israeli media or by the American media, they try to cancel and to delete our history, our culture and our heritage. Tonight, Rashida, she will represent Palestinian culture and history and heritage by her clothes at the American Congress, and that is important to send a message for everyone to understand. We will fight by Rashida or by other ways to give a chance for everyone to know more about Palestinian heritage and cultural and history.
That Rashida will be on the Congress, that make me feel like my dream become true. Rashida make my dream become true. She's the first Palestinian to be a politician, and that means that I can be a politician and I can dream to be a president of Palestine.
Bringing real hope to the Palestinian peoples, which are under the occupation of the Zionists. Let's roll on here. How Rashida came into being is that her comments about before the audience of MoveOn.org, and her comment as far as DJ Trump was concerned, she basically said we'll impeach the MF and left it at that. But that's indicative of the Motor City, Detroit. She's coming out of the Motor City. You could expect that to happen. So Rashida was speaking, quote-unquote, truth to power. Now, Nagler, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, said, well, he didn't like the language. But the door is already open. The barn door was open with DJ Trump talking about the parts of women, and nobody said anything about that. And what little they did say about it, it was like, as LBJ would say, the proverbial water on the duck's back. It just blew off. And this is something to understand, that how politics are conducted today in 2019 and in 2016. The one positive thing DJ Trump has done is he's opened up the arena. Now, we mentioned earlier the monopoly of media, CNN and New York Times, trying to define whom the Democratic Party will select as their candidate. It will not work, period. And the reason it will not work, Elizabeth Warren has went to Iowa, so the people of Iowa, and they love to see people on the street corners there, and she is on the street corners. So the people of Iowa will decide. It will not be those media organizations, period. And same thing with Bernie. Bernie needs to get his general staff in shape, but other than that, Bernie needs to do what Bernie has been doing before. Bernie is already campaigning in places like West Virginia, as far as in New England, New Hampshire, the small towns there. Bernie hasn't been around there. Bernie is the working man's and woman's friend, no doubt about that. That's been his entire history since he was in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. As he was saying the other day, live from the Senate on the Facebook, he was talking about the whole idea of a universal college being free. Well, 100 years ago, high school was the focus because you effectively need a high school degree to advance in the workplace, which a lot of people didn't have a high school degree, but the idea was to get everyone a high school degree. I remember in the 60s, you had places, mail order places you could send and get your high school diploma from these various places. Well, now I suppose you can send and get the university thing, get it on net. But the times have changed, the politics have changed, and the spotlight now on a universal care, Medicare for all, whatever you want to call it, single payer. That time is there. There's states now, Maine being the latest one, to the governor signed executive order to expand Medicaid in Maine. So we're going to see more and more of that happen, that these various states are going to expand their Medicaid programs and other programs affecting health care. Will it cost more money in terms of taxation? Yes. On the front end, that's the thing to remember about all these health care programs. It's on the front end, but on the back end you pay less, and over years your deficit will decrease. You won't be building these phony walls and these other boondoggles they have out there. Let's move to the other news here. There's also in the Detroit paper, big headline here, now's the time to begin the impeachment process against DJ Trump. And this was something Rashida wrote. The only thing I would say on this is now is not the time, but we'll read a little bit of this. DJ Trump is a direct and serious threat to our country. On an almost daily basis, he attacks the Constitution, our democracy, the rule of law, the people who are in this country. His conduct has created a constitutional crisis that we must confront. The framers of the Constitution designated a remedy to address such a constitutional crisis: impeachment. Through the impeachment clause, they sought to ensure that we would have the power through our elected representatives in Congress to protect the country by removing a lawless president from the Oval Office. We already have overwhelming evidence that the president has committed impeachment offenses, including, just to name a few, obstruction of justice, violation of the annulments clause, abusing the pardon power. Well, he couldn't be able to get him on that. But anyway, directing or seeking to direct law enforcement to prosecute police adversaries for improper purposes, advocating illegal violence, and undermining the Equal Protection Clause of the law, ordering the cruel and unconstitutional imprisonment of children and their families at the southern borders, and conspiring to illegally influence the 2016 election through a series of hush money and payments. Now remember, for impeachments, high crimes and misdemeanors. In other words, you could impeach DJ Trump for eating hard-boiled eggs. Whether the president was directly involved in conspiracy with the Russian government to interfere with the 2016 election remains the subject of the special prosecutor's investigation. But we do not need to wait on the outcome of that criminal investigation before moving towards now with an inquiry in the U.S. House of Representatives on whether the president has committed impeachable high crimes and misdemeanors against the state, abuse of power, and abuse of political trust. The other person that also wrote something here is Brian Dickerson. Every passing day brings a new damage to the countless people hurt by this lawless president's action. We cannot undo the tsunami that he is causing to our people and this nation. Those most vulnerable to his administration's cruelty are counting on us to act to remove the president and put the country on a path to true justice. Anyway, this is from the Detroit Free Press. This is an article she wrote. Was more, as they say, than before. The other headline here was on the 4th, and I believe the other headline here was on, let's see, when did she write this one? Well, they both were on the 4th. Anyway, big headline here, Rashida, on DJ Trump, we will impeach the MF. Some people are up in arms about that. I noticed they took it down on Twitter. Anyway, that's neither here nor of there. Let's see what else is here or there. We have to go back over here. Kristen Gillibrand. Now, this is from CNBC. Gauges Wall Street executives interested in backing a potential 2020 run. Has been reaching out to Wall Street executives about supporting the run. Gillibrand has personally been working the phones and calling senior executives at Wall Street firms in recent weeks to see whether they would back her campaign if she jumps into the race. Gillibrand has gotten a mixed response from executives. However, some have enthusiastically kept the door open to helping her finance a possible 2020 run. A few business leaders and other Democratic donors have been privately critical of Gillibrand's early efforts to force the resignation of Al Franken. While Al Franken was entitled to an ethics committee hearing, and he should have had one, and that was very unfortunate that the other person got caught up in that was Carmelita Harris of California. And we'll see how this plays out. Franklin supporters in the business community argued Gillibrand should have allowed the eventual Senate Ethics Committee investigation to conclude before rushing to demand a resignation. This is sometimes things that will hurt you. If Gillibrand decides to run, and she will run a campaign that takes no corporate PAC money and is powered by grassroots donations based on her values of standing up to those in power and returning our democracy to the people. As a spokesperson said, later Gillibrand responded to this story in a tweet. Noting her voting record on financial regulation, she did not deny having conversations with executives. My record co-sponsored financial transaction tax, supported repeal of Glass-Steagall, and voted against the bank bailout twice. So those are some things she's done. Now, will they be enough? No. It's a very, very crowded field out there, and effectively puts her in a peculiar situation that she's actually running for vice president. Center for Responsible Politics, the lawyers and law firms gave $2.2 million to back Gillibrand's campaign. She finished the cycle raising $17 million and has $10 million on hand. Well, that's enough to fly to Iowa. So she's not out of it. Others had said if they're considering running, well, you know, it's interesting here. They mentioned Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke, and Twitter King Booker, and Amy Klobuchar, but they don't mention Bernie Sanders. They don't want a business journal saying anything about her. They do mention that Elizabeth Warren launched an exploratory committee out there. So let's go to the Washington Post. We usually go to them for national stories. It's read early today, tax refunds. Now, this is one of the things with the DJ Trump shutdown program, tax refunds as we move in January here, and if it goes towards the middle of January, those refunds will be coming slowly because the IRS is effectively closed down. The people that would process those are not there. And even food aid has got problems because of shutdown with the part of the Department of Agriculture. But verifications is the big situation there for many, many programs that would use tax returns. Would be utterly impossible to verify and cause administrative problems. Period. And the latest on DJ Trump and his wall, he just basically said it could be shut down for a year. Well, the whole point there is that the shutting down the partial, or whatever they want to call it, for a year will not happen. It could happen for several months. There's no doubt about that. But the more months it goes on, in other words, if it goes through January, the more difficult for the Republicans to shake it off. When old Trump had his news conference outside the White House, conspicuously absent was old man McConnell, the leader of the Senate, because he's up for re-election. And Mr. Bashir is waiting on him. That'll be interesting when we cover Fancy Farm and what's going on there. And several other Republicans, like old, what's the name, that puts itself out as a moderate out of Maine. It's time to retire her also there from Maine. Another headline, he won't even read it. Time for Democrats to be grown-up voters, to be grown-ups. Voters want, anyway. That Frederick Douglass, from hunted fugitive slave to brilliant elder statesman, that's Adam Goodhart. We might have that on, you have to think about it a minute here. Buying frizzy hits Wall Street as fears of economic recession retreats. Well, we talked about the speech, and we'll cover that on numbers, man. About actually what's happening there. That's premature. A lot of that, and we'll talk a little about the psychology of the market and get more into that. And basically some of this is the St. Patty's Day parade. A fixture here won't be held this year. I don't know what happened to St. Patty. This is Washington St. Patty's Parade, which has been a fixture since 1971. The committee, which puts on the parade, said it was distressed to announce the 2019 parade is canceled over half century of its existence. The committee said the parade grew from what was once little more of an leisure stroll by a few hundred participants on Mass Ave to a mile-long, 2-hour celebration of Irish culture on Constitutional Avenue. And let's see what else. The committee said, growing security costs. That's the problem there. Attributed to overhead expenses, security requirements imposed by the district. So modern day events have done. St. Patty's in Washington D.C. Well, we have a parade in Boston. They'll have one out in Chicago and various other places, so it won't be missed. That's one way of putting it. We'll close this out and go do the sports. Dana Milbrandt here. It's time for Democrats to be grown-up, the grown-ups the voters want. This is interesting here. I watched from the House gallery on Tuesday when Democrat Socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and a suffragette White rose to announce her vote for the Speaker. Yeah, that's over 200 members have voted for Nancy Pelosi, yet the Republicans only booed one. Don't hate me because you ain't me, fellas. Actually, Republicans love Ocasio-Cortez the same way the Democrats love Mark Meadows, though I doubt that very seriously. They hate her politics, but they hope the young representative will sow division amongst the Democrats. Well, she's not a fool. And then Rashida, the country's on fire. This is time for Democrats to be grown-up voters, but that's just silly here. This is not only Pollyannish, it's racist. It's time for Rashida, mere hours after being sworn in, to tell a cheering crowd, we're going to impeach the mother. No doubt about that. It's time for, Brad Sherman. He's from California. Without waiting for the report, just said plans to introduce articles of impeachment against DJ Trump. Progressives aren't solely to blame. 15 Democrats refused to vote for her, including Jeb Vanderdew. I'm not sure who he is. Abigail didn't vote for her either. So anyway, it goes there. A few hours after her vote, Ocasio-Cortez swung the other way on the first substantive vote. She opposed a resolution should have called Pay As You Go. That's something Bill Clinton came up with at one time. Later reported that Ocasio-Cortez was seeking a 2020 challenger to Rakeem Jeffers, a popular African-American progressive, and the House leader. She denied that. Well, he's been treacherous, there's no doubt about that. I remember Rakeem Jeffers when he used to come to the National Action Center. There was silence on the Republican side. Now a sea of old white men. They don't applaud for Reagan. Well, yeah, they are growing older. There's a lot of people growing older around here. There's no doubt about that. Here's a smiling picture of Nancy Pelosi and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the right. And let's see who else is there at the center. Oh, her mother. Okay, well. Nice looking mother there. She's in white, and Nancy Pelosi is there. They're all happy. I'll have to get this picture to post it up. We had some polling here. Let me just go to it quickly from the Reuters folk, I believe. I read it earlier here. I think I have time to get it in. Oops. This would have been there, so in the past. There we can get it. It going here? Yeah, it was on Thursday. This is Reuters had DJ Trump at 41%. His approval, we threw it up on excuse me, on Facebook. Over half of America, 55%, believe America is headed off on the wrong track. Well, this has been going on for a while. Just 1/3, I believe, on the right track. Democrats are more likely to say America is headed on the wrong track, 81% compared to about half of the independents, 56%, and a quarter of the Republicans. DJ Trump's approval rating stands at 41 amongst all Americans, unchanged in recent weeks. Trump's Republican base continues to support him with 81% reporting they approve of the job he's doing. 47% strongly approve. Democrats 12%, independents 36% are much likely to approve of Trump's performance. When tracking Pacific issues, half of the Americans approve of Trump's handling of employment and jobs, 52%. And the U.S. economy, 49%. That's down a little bit there. Americans are much less likely to approve of his performance on corruption, only 35%. Of Russia, 36%. Public support of his position is only marginal better at, and immigration, 42%. Well. And congressional approval rating during the shutdown has remained statistically unchanged. 26% of Americans approve of Congress as a whole. 43% approve of their individual representatives. But they re-elect them most of the time. 1 in 5 Americans consider health care, 19%, to be the most important issue. That has been in many, many polls, followed by immigration at 17%. Some polls, immigration is lower, the economy at 11%, and mortality at 11%. Republicans and Democrats continue to have different priorities when considering the bigger issues. 1/3 of Republicans, 31%, view immigration as the biggest problem, and a quarter of Democrats, 23%, view health care. So that is the study by the Reuters that saw people. It was conducted the 26th, the day after Christmas, to January the 1st. They used 1,042. 881 with Democrats and Republican independents. Let's see, let me get this right here. This actually was a sample of 2,482. Of that, 1,042 with Democrats, 881 Republicans, and 301 independents, age 18 plus, were interviewed. The credibility interval, plus or minus 2.2%. For all adults, 3.5%. For Democrats, 3.8%. For Republicans, and 6.5% for independents. And, of course, the data was weighted. Let's go to sports now. We're keeping this pretty much on time. We'll go first to the NBA from last night, and then to the NHL. We have the college playoffs, incidentally, on Monday, for those that are paying attention to it. On Friday the 4th, the Jazz were at the Cavaliers in Cleveland. It was the Jazz 117-191 over the Cavaliers. The Wizards were at the Heat 115-109 for the Wizards. In overtime, the Pacers and Bulls in Chicago. Pacers pulled that out, 119-116. The Nets and Grizzlies. It was the Nets 109-100 over the Grizzlies. The Magic and T-Wolves in Minnesota. T-Wolves 120-103 for the Magic. I didn't have much magic there. The Mavericks were in Boston. Celtics 114-93 for the Mavericks of Dallas. The Hawks and Bucks in Milwaukee was the Bucks 144-112. The Clippers and Suns in Arizona. It was the Clippers 121-111. The Knickerbockers and Lakers in Los Angeles. It was the Knicks 119-112. Don't see that happen very much. And the Thunder and Trailblazers out in Portland. It was the Trailblazers 101-109. It was the Thunder 111-109 for the Trailblazers. Almost couldn't believe the score myself. And in the NHL, the Jets of Winnipeg and the Penguins in Pittsburgh. It was the Penguins 4-0. They shut out the Jets. the Predators and the Red Wings in the Motor City. It was the Red Wings 4-3. I guess they did one for Rashida in an overtime game. The Blue Jackets and the Hurricanes 4-2. The Capitals and Stars in an overtime also. The Stars 2-1. The Rangers and Avalanche. It was the Avalanche 5-1 over the Rangers, and the Devils and Coyotes. The Devils, 3-2. And finally, the Golden Knights of Las Vegas and the Anaheim Ducks. It was the Golden Knights 3-2 in that contest. This will do it for us on the 5th of January 2019, the week that was, the first one of 2019. Boston Red from the Jerry Pippen broadcast booth. We'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback. In our other programs, we'll have, of course, Numbers Man, and we'll have it, and we'll be talking about the psychology of the market, a little bit of microeconomics thrown into macro anyway. Those are the days we have, and is the Federal Reserve Chair, Powell Sape, what he had to say at the American Economics Association. Get a little bit academic there. And an open source report, we'll talk about security, open source. Even found an open source chess game out there. And we'll talk about the 70s and the forums that they had in the 70s. This is one we really hadn't visited in some time, if we can find it. Anyway, I guess we won't be finishing it today either, but visiting it today, anyway, we'll have to get it. And our friends at the Institute for Supply Management, and we'll talk about where they are in the situation, and sometimes you can't find things when you're looking for them. It's probably on a different server. Oh no, doing Watergate, and Tricky Dick, tried to shut down Plato. Anyway, we'll talk about Plato. It was the world's first hash mark was Watergate. This is in Slate, kind of interesting here. And we'll talk about Plato a little bit there. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the Monday Morning Quarterback.